Chapter 9. Dougie. Dougie stared out at the small crowd and wondered how they were going to change minds with such few people. It was true that he'd only brought up the idea a few weeks ago, and this was their first prayer walk. Still, he'd hoped for a bigger turnout than this. There were only 10 or 15 people milling about, which didn't seem nearly enough to make a difference. But then he realized this would reveal God's power. This small group couldn't do much, but God could. He thought back to all the times in the Bible when God had sent soldiers home, or stood with the small, the few, the outnumbered. It was in these situations when his glory was revealed, because people alone couldn't accomplish the feats.
Thank you for coming out today,
he said, holding up his hands to quiet the little chatter that circled through the group.
We had no idea if this would be a success or not, and I'm grateful for those of you who have come out to try it with us. This idea was inspired by my friend Israel and his wife Tiffany.
He smiled at the couple standing to his right.
After years of struggling to start their family, they've turned to adoption, but in the process, they've found that there aren't enough babies up for adoption to meet the demand from couples just like them. So our goal is to pray that women choose life for their babies and put them up for adoption. We're going to walk to the outskirts where the new healthcare center was recently built, and we're going to pray as we do it. There won't be any signs and no yelling, but if people ask us what we're doing, we will tell them. Remember to be respectful and kind. People may not know the love of God.
Are we praying aloud? Someone asked from the crowd.
You can pray however you'd like, Dougie answered. The Bible says that where 2 or more believers are gathered in his name, there he is also. This is about God being in our midst and doing his will.
He surveyed the group to see if there were any further questions, but the group merely nodded.
Okay, let's get started.
The walk toward the edge of town was quiet, each person in their own thoughts. When they reached the center, the group broke off into small clusters to pray. Though it was a nice day outside, few people were on the streets, and only one entered the center while they were there. Dougie couldn't help but feel disappointed as they headed back to the meetup place.
I'm sorry that wasn't more productive, Israel.
Israel smiled and clapped a hand on his shoulder.
Don't say that. We have no idea what God is doing with what we did today, and it was the first time. It will grow.
Dougie hoped so. He didn't mind giving up a Saturday morning to do the Lord's work. But if every Saturday was like this one, he would have a hard time keeping his enthusiasm up.
I hope you're right. I know I am. Look, how about we go to Becca's? Coffee and pastries make everything better.
Tiffany grinned. They work for me. I may not be pregnant, but I must be having sympathy cravings because a chocolate croissant sounds decadent right now. Dougie wasn't sure he was in the mood for snacks, but he'd go for the conversation. Plus, it would give him a chance to check on Holly, who would be opening her restaurant soon.
Okay, sounds good.
Becca's bakery was bustling when they arrived, so after getting their orders, they exited to an outdoor table, where they could sit and have a chance at hearing each other speak.
Do you really think this prayer walk thing will take off?
Dougie asked, before taking a bite of his cinnamon roll. Israel nodded.
I do. Look, the more we do it, the more people will see and start talking about it. Hopefully they'll join us, but anything to get the word out will help.
Maybe we should hang flyers in some of the store windows, Tiffany said. I'm sure Chance would let us put some up at the resort.
Yeah, and I bet Becca and Holly would too. Then we could start asking the other owners.
Courage wasn't a completely conservative Christian town, but it tended to lean that way. Still, Dougie knew some of the shop owners would frown on anything pro-life being placed in their store, and he worried those who supported them might also opt out so as not to alienate customers.
We could try, but businesses might have to remain neutral. We could post them on lampposts, though, and I think there is a bulletin board of events in the community center and the grocery store.
That's a great idea, Israel said, and then his attention was drawn to something behind Dougie. Dougie turned, and his heart dropped when he saw Frederick entering Holly's restaurant.
What is he doing there? Should we call the police? Israel asked.
On what? Tiffany turned to see what they were looking at and shook her head. The police? Why would you call the police on Frederick? He's probably opening. Holly hired him a few weeks ago. A punch to the gut would have been less surprising than Tiffany's statement.
What?
Tiffany turned back to him, her eyebrow lifted in confusion. Holly hired him. He got an apartment and is staying in town. Did you not know? Dougie had tried hard to keep thoughts of Holly and Frederick out of his mind. He'd assumed the guy would stick around a few days, maybe a week, and then be gone. But when it had become obvious he was staying longer, Dougie had forced himself not to think about them together.
I knew he was staying longer, but I didn't know she hired him.
I mean, I guess it makes sense, Tiffany said with a shrug. He is a chef like her and knows the business. I just wish he weren't so... She chewed her lip, trying to think of the right word.
Smarmy, Dougie offered.
I don't know if smarmy was the word I was searching for, but something about him bothers me, she said.
Me too, Israel said softly. I can't put a finger on it, but I don't trust him. Shouldn't we tell Holly, like an intervention or something? Dougie asked.
He was surprised to learn his friends felt the same way about Frederick that he did, but he was glad. It meant his feelings weren't just jealousy. Tiffany grimaced and shook her head. I don't think so, at least not right now. She's happy, and I doubt she'd listen to us.
But isn't it our job to protect her as friends? Dougie asked.
If we had something concrete, sure. But we just have our feelings, Dougie. All that would do is make her mad at us. We'll just have to pray we're either wrong or his true colors get revealed soon. Dougie knew Tiffany was right, but it didn't make it any easier. He glanced back at Holly's restaurant one more time and sighed. He hadn't asked for it, but it seemed as if God was working on his patience right now, and it could definitely use some work.